At 56, I thought I had everything. A corner office on the 45th floor, a seven-figure salary, and enough plaques on my wall to impress anyone who walked in. Then I pressed play on the last voicemail my wife ever left me. "If there's a next life," she said, "I'd choose a man who listens, not one who promises." In that moment, my world stopped. I had spent 30 years chasing clients, closing deals, building a name, and not once did I realize I was building it on the ashes of my own family. My wife Lisa passed away while I was on stage accepting an award. My daughter had called 5 times. I ignored every single one. Now I sleep alone in the house she decorated, eat meals in silence at the table she once set, and play that voicemail every night just to remember her voice. Not because I want to, but because it's all I have left of the woman who waited for me longer than any human should. This story isn't just about regret. It's about what happens when you win at the wrong game. But it's also about redemption. The kind that demands everything you didn't give when it actually mattered. If you've ever wondered whether your job is worth the people you love, stay with me. This might just save you from learning the same lesson the hard way. My name is Michael Brennan. I'm 56 years old, born and raised in the south side of Chicago, where dreams came cheap but rent didn't. My father drank himself into the type of silence that bruises a home. My mother worked nights at a diner and days cleaning houses, trying to stretch dignity over the holes in our reality. She died of a stroke when I was 16, on a city bus headed to her third job. The paramedics said it was quick. I never told them she was on that bus because I needed new cleats for the school team. That guilt never left me. Maybe that's why I swore I'd never be poor again. I clawed my way into a scholarship at Northwestern, flipped burgers between lectures, slept 3 hours a night. Every B on a test felt like a threat to my escape. Law school was next, then internships, then finally, one afternoon in a hospital waiting room, Lisa. She was the nurse on duty when my mother collapsed during a court hearing I had insisted she attend. Lisa didn't just care for her. She stayed after her shift, sat with me while I shook with shame and loss. Her voice was the first softness I'd heard in months. We met for coffee the week after the funeral. I talked about tort law. She talked about how people remember kindness, not billable hours. 6 months later, I proposed with a ring from a pawn shop and a note that said, "I can't promise wealth, but I'll never stop fighting for it." She laughed and said yes before I could finish the sentence. We married under a crabapple tree in her parents' backyard. No orchestra, no luxury hotel, just us, her sister officiating, and a future we were too naive to be afraid of. I wore my only suit. She wore her grandmother's lace. It rained halfway through, and we danced in it like fools. I remember the smell of her hair that day, like lavender and rain, and thinking, this woman is my real beginning. Our first apartment had peeling paint, a fridge that moaned louder than the city traffic, and a window view of a brick wall. But we had coffee every morning together. We fought over laundry, laughed over frozen pizzas, made love like the world outside didn't exist. When Lisa got pregnant a year later, we cried on the same couch, we argued over bills. Our son Daniel was born after 14 hours of labor. I held him with hands still ink-stained from court briefs. He had Lisa's eyes and my mother's nose. I looked at him and whispered, "You'll never ride a city bus alone." I meant every word. That night, in the maternity room with its flickering ceiling light, I promised Lisa and Daniel that I would build a life none of us would need to recover from. No charity handouts, no secondhand regrets. I would rise, and they would never feel cold again. I took the first job I was offered. Junior associate at a mid-sized firm known more for its workload than its prestige. 60-hour weeks were standard, weekend emails expected. I told Lisa it was temporary. She nodded with a smile that said she believed me, even if she shouldn't have. When I got my first bonus, I bought her a bracelet and a second-hand stroller. She kissed me like I had brought home gold. We were still broke, but we were rich in everything that mattered, at least back then. I wish I had understood that back then doesn't last forever. The first 5 years at the firm were a blur of briefs, red-eye flights, and courtrooms with more personality than my colleagues. I rose fast. By 35, I was managing a team, winning mid-level cases, and seeing my name on internal newsletters. Promotions came, slow but steady, each one a rung on the ladder out of the poverty I'd sworn to escape. Lisa cheered me on like I was playing in a championship. She packed lunches, stayed up late to hear about trials she didn't understand, let me vent about partners who used words like synergy and pivot too often. She kept our home steady while I ran full speed towards success. But success has a way of arriving dressed as absence. I started missing things. Small things at first. Daniel's preschool art show. A Sunday brunch with Lisa's parents. Her birthday dinner was rescheduled 3 times before I finally took her out. Exhausted, half listening, my phone buzzing beside the wine glasses. "Next year will be better," I said. She smiled and nodded, but something in her eyes began to close. There were no fights. Lisa didn't scream or slam doors. She just adjusted, quietly. She stopped waiting up for me. She planned holidays without checking my calendar. The framed photos on my desk grew older, untouched, while Daniel outgrew his baby face, and Lisa changed her hairstyle 3 times before I noticed. One Saturday, I came home early, court was postponed, and found Lisa sketching at the kitchen table. The paper was filled with intricate interior designs, room layouts, color schemes. "I didn't know you draw," I said. She looked up, surprised. "I used to, before Daniel." She hesitated, then added, "I have a degree in design, graduated top of my class." It landed like a stone in my chest. I had always assumed she'd taken a couple of community college courses, nothing serious. I never asked. "You never told me." She shrugged, gently folding the paper. "You never asked." I stood there, exposed. This woman, who raised our son, held our home together, kissed my temples through late-night stress, had lived a whole life I hadn't seen. Worse, I had dismissed it, labeled her as sweet but simple. That night, I lay awake next to her, staring at the ceiling fan, wondering how many other truths I had missed because I was too busy being important. The next week, Daniel had his first soccer game. I promised I'd be there. It was circled in red on the calendar. Lisa texted me reminders. Daniel picked out a tie for me to wear. "So you'll look cool when you cheer." But court ran long. Then a client called. Then traffic. By the time I arrived, the field was empty. Daniel's water bottle the only thing left on the bench. Lisa didn't say a word. She just handed me dinner in a foil container and walked upstairs. Later that night, I found Daniel in his room, coloring. I sat on the edge of his bed, trying to make it up to him. "Next game, I'll be there early," I said. He looked at me, not angry, just puzzled. "Dad, do you live here?" I froze. "What do you mean?" "Well," he said, coloring within the lines, "you're always somewhere else, so I wasn't sure." I heard Lisa crying in the hallway. That question, asked without malice, just innocent curiosity, hit me harder than any courtroom loss ever could. I was becoming a guest in my own family's life. At 42, I became regional general counsel for one of the largest real estate conglomerates in the Midwest. The title came with a corner office, a company car, and a handshake from the CEO that smelled like leather and legacy. I was on magazine covers, speaking at conferences, mentoring rising associates who called me sir, even in emails. People shook my hand like it meant something. My voice carried weight in boardrooms. Interns whispered my name with awe. I had become the man I once dreamed of while folding laundry at midnight in a one-bedroom apartment. And yet, I was more alone than I had ever been. At home, conversations had shrunk to logistics, pickup times, grocery lists, doctor appointments. Lisa no longer asked about my cases, and I no longer asked about her days. Daniel called me Michael once by accident. I laughed. Lisa didn't. Dinners were eaten in silence. Lisa sat at one end of the table, Daniel at the other. I was the one in the middle, yet somehow the furthest away. I came home one evening after a gala where I was honored as Legal Mind of the Year. The plaque was heavy, gold-trimmed, wrapped in a velvet case. I placed it on the kitchen counter like a gift. Lisa was folding laundry. She glanced at it and said nothing. "I thought you'd be proud," I offered. "I am," she replied without looking up. "Just tired." "Of what?" She paused, folded a shirt, then whispered, "Of waiting." Later that week, I took Daniel shopping, trying to reconnect, make up for missed time. We passed a bookstore, and I noticed a window display. Children's Drawing Contest winners. There it was, Daniel's sketch, signed with crayon. Me and Mom at the park. No Dad, not even in the background. That night I found Lisa in our bedroom, staring at an envelope on the nightstand. She didn't notice me. I saw her fingers tremble as she held it, then rip it in half. Slowly, precisely, like she'd rehearsed. She looked up. I pretended not to notice. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked. "Something like that." She went to brush her teeth. I picked up the torn paper from the trash. It was a divorce filing, unsigned but filled out completely. Lisa had been one signature away from leaving me, and I hadn't even seen it coming. That night, I sat in my office surrounded by accolades, awards, certificates, framed letters from law schools, and none of them could explain how I had become a stranger to the people I loved. I had won everything I once thought mattered, but I had no one left to celebrate with. By the time I noticed, they had already adapted. It's strange how a family doesn't collapse all at once. It drifts, shifts, reshapes itself around the absence until it no longer sees it as absence. Just routine. Lisa started taking yoga classes 3 times a week. She joined a neighborhood group for single mothers, though we were still technically married. At first, I assumed it was for support, maybe even for friendship. But one evening, I overheard her on a Zoom call. "No, I'm not divorced," she said, sipping tea in her calmest voice. "But it feels like I've been single for years." I should have walked in, said something, anything. But I stood in the hallway, holding my briefcase like a shield, listening to my wife redefine herself without me. She stopped cooking for 3. Dinner was now plated for 2. My meals were left in containers in the fridge with sticky notes. Microwave 2 men's. Daniel, now 11, no longer asked if I'd be home. He just assumed I wouldn't. One night, I reached for the wall calendar to check my week ahead. Lisa always kept it updated with family events, school meetings, birthdays. My name used to appear in blue ink. Dad picks up. Michael home late. Family dinner. Now the calendar was a 2-person dialogue. Lisa, yoga 6 p.m., Daniel, piano 4 p.m. No mention of me, not even on our anniversary. I asked Lisa about it casually. "You're always too busy," she said, not with anger but something colder, acceptance. Didn't want to clutter the schedule with maybes. That night, I found a crayon drawing taped to the fridge. A house, a tree, a woman, and a boy holding hands. "Where's Dad?" I asked Daniel. He shrugged. "I didn't know how to draw you." The words stung, not because they were mean, but because they were honest. I tried to fix it in small ways. Came home early one Wednesday, bought Lisa flowers, sunflowers, her favorite. When I handed them to her, she smiled politely, placed them in a vase, and then returned to folding laundry. Daniel asked, "Are you staying for dinner?" I said yes. He blinked like he didn't believe me. Halfway through the meal, my phone buzzed. Urgent client email. I excused myself, promising I'd be quick. When I returned, the table was cleared. The next week, I came across a notebook in Emily's backpack, our 9-year-old daughter. I opened it without thinking, expecting spelling words or doodles. Instead, I found a page titled, "Things I Know." The first line read, "Daddy is the man who comes to get food and disappears again." I closed the book and sat on the floor, breath shallow. That sentence looped in my head like a broken record. It wasn't anger. It wasn't rebellion. It was definition. I wasn't even a villain in my daughter's life. I was just a ghost. That weekend, Lisa and the kids went apple picking with the moms group. I stayed behind. Buried in work, I told myself couldn't wait. But as I watched their car pull away, a thought struck me. They didn't look back. I spent that Saturday wandering the quiet house, touching objects I hadn't noticed in years. A handprint Daniel made in kindergarten. A photo of Lisa laughing at the beach, one I didn't take. When they returned, I offered to help with groceries. Lisa handed me one bag, then walked away. In the kitchen, Emily clung to her mother's leg, whispering something. Lisa responded softly, then turned to me. She asked if you're sleeping over tonight. "I live here," I said, almost offended. Lisa just looked at me, tired and unsmiling. Not from her point of view. That night I stood outside Emily's door, listening to her breathing. I wanted to knock, to say something, to erase that line in her notebook. But I didn't. I went downstairs and reheated a cold meal with my name scribbled on the lid. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't part of their rhythm anymore. I was the pause between beats, unnoticed until I disrupted the pattern. Lisa's 40th birthday landed on a Thursday. Court day for me, always packed. I knew I wouldn't make dinner, not with the client meetings stacked back to back and a board presentation the next morning. But I wanted her to feel remembered, so I sent her a car. Not just any car, a gleaming midnight blue SUV with leather seats and her favorite music preloaded into the system. It arrived in our driveway with a red bow and a handwritten note. "You deserve to ride in something worthy of you." She didn't call. No photos, no emojis, no thank you text. I came home the next night, late again, and found her sitting at the kitchen table alone, half a chocolate cake untouched beside her. "Happy birthday," I said, kissing her head. She pulled away gently. "Did you like the car?" I asked. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. "But Michael, what I needed wasn't 4 wheels." I waited. She looked up, eyes weary. "I needed 2 hands, yours, at the table, clapping when I blew out the candles, cutting cake with our kids, laughing, holding mine. That's what I wanted." I had no reply. My words, crafted daily in courtrooms, failed me in my own kitchen. Daniel's behavior at school started shifting not long after. He used to be quiet, a rule follower. Then came the detentions, talking back to teachers, skipping assignments, fighting. We were called in for a meeting. Lisa attended alone. I had a deposition. Later, she gave me the summary like it was just another report. They think he's angry, confused. He talks a lot about feeling invisible. I'll talk to him, I said. When? She asked, tone flat. Between meetings? Over voicemail? Daniel stopped asking me to watch his soccer games. Instead, he asked Lisa not to tell me when they were. Then came the night I found Lisa in the bathroom, leaning against the sink, pale and gripping the edge with white knuckles. You okay? I asked. She nodded too fast. Just tired. But I noticed the pill bottle. Liver medication. Her name on the label. I reached for it. She snatched it away. Lisa, what's going on? She hesitated. A long pause. Then she said, It's nothing. Some tests. I didn't want to worry you. What tests? She turned away. You have enough on your plate. I pressed. She folded. A growth, she said finally. On my liver. They're monitoring it. My stomach dropped. When did this start? 3 months ago. 3. Why the hell didn't you tell me? She met my eyes. Because you would have said the words, but your calendar would have stayed the same. And I didn't want pity between conference calls. It wasn't bitterness in her voice. It was resignation. That night, I sat on the edge of our bed, watching her sleep. Her breath shallow. Her arm curled protectively around a pillow. I reached to touch her hand and stopped halfway. My fingers hovered, then fell back to my lap. The woman I loved was sick, possibly dying, and I hadn't even noticed. The next morning, I canceled a meeting to take her to the doctor. But when I offered, she shook her head. I'm handling it, she said. You just keep doing what you do. Twist the knife gently, I thought. She had already made peace with the fact that I wasn't going to be her partner through this. Later that week, I found a series of medical brochures stuffed in the glove compartment of the new car I'd given her. Chemotherapy, support groups, nutritional counseling. She was preparing. Alone. At dinner, I tried to apologize. Lisa, I want to be there for you, really. She looked up, fork halfway to her mouth. Then start by showing up. Not in words, in time, in presence. Because I'm not sure how much of it I have left. That sentence rang in my ears long after she left the room. But I didn't change my schedule. I didn't cancel the upcoming conference in Vegas. I didn't sit through the next doctor appointment. Because somewhere, deep down, I still thought there'd be time. Lisa had become quieter in recent weeks. Not distant, just thinner, like her presence had lost weight. Her voice softened, her footsteps slowed, her eyes dimmed in a way I kept telling myself was just exhaustion. She still smiled at Emily's jokes, still helped Daniel with school projects, still packed my lunch when I remembered to ask. But her smiles no longer reached her eyes, and when I leaned in to kiss her cheek, she flinched, not out of anger, but surprise, like she'd forgotten that intimacy was once a thing between us. One night, I found her sitting at the kitchen table long after the kids had gone to bed. The lights were low. A cup of tea sat untouched. She was writing, slow, deliberate strokes in a blue notebook I didn't recognize. I stood behind her, unnoticed. What are you working on? I asked. She jumped, closed the notebook quickly. Just thoughts. You okay? She smiled gently. You always ask that when you don't really want to know. I didn't push. What I didn't know was that 10 minutes before I walked in, she had written the words, If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here. She had begun writing her goodbye. But then Emily walked in. She had a nightmare. Lisa shut the notebook instantly, tucked it beneath a stack of bills, and pulled her daughter into her arms. Emily asked, "Mommy, are you going somewhere?" Lisa paused, then whispered, "Not if I can help it." She held her tighter that night than she had in months. The next morning, I left for a legal conference in Las Vegas. I kissed Lisa on the forehead. She was half asleep or pretending to be, and told her I'd be back in 3 days. She murmured, "Be safe." I didn't ask about her latest test results. I didn't notice how pale she looked in the sunlight slipping through the blinds. At the airport, I answered emails, finalized a presentation, joked with colleagues over coffee. Meanwhile, back home, Lisa collapsed in the shower. Daniel found her. He called 911, called his aunt, called everyone except me. Lisa was rushed to the hospital with internal bleeding. I was on stage in a ballroom of 300 people, delivering a keynote speech about corporate ethics. My phone buzzed in my pocket, repeatedly. I ignored it. Stage etiquette, professionalism, priorities. After the applause, I checked my phone. 5 missed calls, 2 voicemails, one from Daniel, voice shaking. "Dad, Mom's in the hospital. It's bad. Where are you?" The second was from Lisa. She'd recorded it while the ambulance sirens screamed in the distance. "Michael." Her voice cracked, breath short. "I know you're busy. I just, in case I don't get to say it, thank you. For our children. For the good years. I never stopped loving you, even when I had to stop hoping." I played it twice, then again. The room spun. Applause still echoed in the hallway. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from the weight of time lost. I booked the first flight back. Delayed. Weather. By the time I reached the hospital, Lisa was unconscious. Machines beeped steadily. Daniel sat in a chair, fists clenched. Emily slept curled on his lap. Lisa never woke up that night. I stood over her, touched her forehead, whispered apologies too late. In my pocket, the phone still buzzed with messages from work. I turned it off. That voicemail, the one she left before the ambulance arrived, became my lullaby. I listened to it that night in the hospital parking lot, sitting in the rental car, forehead pressed against the steering wheel. If I don't get to say it, thank you. I never stopped loving you. The words stabbed and soothed in equal measure. And for the first time in a decade, I cried until I couldn't breathe. The day started like a triumph. I had just closed one of the biggest cases of my career, an antitrust battle between 2 real estate giants that had dragged on for over a year. My closing argument landed like a hammer. The jury ruled unanimously in our favor. The partners took me to lunch at a rooftop steakhouse. Toasts were made, congratulations offered. One even joked about nominating me for a national legal award. I laughed, not out of arrogance, but exhaustion. A reporter caught me in the lobby afterward. "What's next for Michael Brennan?" she asked, thrusting a microphone in my face. I smiled, adjusted my tie. "Whatever comes, I'm ready." While I was clinking glasses and shaking hands, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Once, twice, 5 times in a row. I glanced at the screen. Emily, then Daniel, then Emily again. I silenced it, slipped it back into my coat. We had a dinner planned with clients. I told myself I'd call them back after dessert. I told myself they could wait. They couldn't. The voicemail came at 7:12 p.m. I listened to it in the restroom, leaning against a marble sink, the buzz of celebration muffled by thick walls. Lisa's voice filled the space. Weak, breathless, trembling. "Michael, I know you're busy. In case I don't get to say it, thank you. For our children. For the good years. I never stopped loving you, even when I had to stop hoping. I stood there frozen, hand gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Then came the second voicemail. Emily. Dad, Mom's in surgery. They said it's bad. Why didn't you pick up? Her voice cracked, then dropped to a whisper. She kept asking for you. I left without saying goodbye. No explanations. No dessert. In the back of the Uber, I called the hospital. A nurse answered. Her tone was gentle, clinical. She asked my name. Then there was a pause. I'm sorry, Mr. Brennan, she said. Lisa passed during the operation. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Your children are here, she continued. They're asking for you. I hung up. The city outside blurred into meaningless lights. My heartbeat drowned out everything else. I arrived at the hospital 30 minutes later. The hall smelled of antiseptic and cold air. Daniel sat in the waiting room, shoulders slumped, fists clenched. Emily sat beside him, her small hands wrapped around a crumpled tissue. They didn't look up when I entered. I walked past them, toward the room where Lisa lay. She was still, eyes closed, hands folded neatly across her chest. She looked peaceful, like she was sleeping. But she wasn't. I touched her hand. It was already cool. I'm here, I whispered. I'm sorry. I'm here now. But I wasn't. Not when it mattered. Behind me, Emily's voice broke the silence. She kept calling you, she said. Even in pain, she kept saying your name. I turned. She stared at me, eyes hollow. You didn't answer. I wanted to say I was in court, that I didn't know, that I planned to call back. But every excuse felt like sand in my mouth. Daniel stood up slowly, walked past me, then turned back. You gave your best arguments to strangers, he said, but couldn't even pick up for Mom. He didn't wait for a response. He took Emily's hand and walked away. I was left alone, with the machines, with the body of the woman who had waited too long. I sat beside her and played the voicemail again. If there's a next life, I'd choose a man who listens, not one who promises. The line cracked near the end. She was crying. And so was I. The house felt like a museum after the funeral. Quiet, sterile, haunted by the absence of sound that once filled it. Lisa's favorite mug still sat in the sink. Her scarf remained draped over the armchair. Her scent lingered in the hallway. Daniel and Emily hadn't spoken to me much since we returned home. They moved like shadows, whispering between themselves, avoiding eye contact. I tried to bridge the gap. I suggested we eat together. I offered to drive them to school. I even attempted to cook dinner, something Lisa had once joked would require divine intervention. They declined, politely, coldly. 3 days after the funeral, I sat alone at the kitchen table scrolling through my emails, half-heartedly deleting condolences from colleagues I barely remembered. Then I made a mistake. I opened an online news article from the firm's gala. There I was, smiling in a photo, glass raised, flanked by partners and CEOs, moments before Lisa's surgery. The caption read, Michael Brennan celebrates career victory at annual legal summit. I didn't notice Daniel behind me until I heard the screen door slam against the wall. He stormed in, eyes wide, chest heaving. You were smiling? He shouted. That night? While Mom was... I didn't know she was... He didn't let me finish. The slap came fast, sharp, open palm across my cheek, not with fury but devastation. You smiled, he said again, voice cracking, and she was dying. I didn't move. Couldn't. Emily appeared at the doorway, drawn by the shouting. Her eyes flicked between us. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. "You were celebrating?" "I wasn't celebrating her death," I said, barely able to speak. "I didn't know. I swear to you I didn't know." "But you didn't answer," she whispered. "We called so many times. She kept asking for you, and you smiled." Daniel's voice was low now. "She needed you, and you chose applause." I tried to step closer. Emily flinched. "I've made mistakes," I said, hands shaking. "So many. But I loved your mother. I still do." "Then prove it," Emily said. "What was the song you and Mom danced to at your wedding?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. The silence hung like a noose. I began, reaching for any memory. "Was it Louis Armstrong?" Emily's lip trembled. She shook her head. "It was Harvest Moon," she said. "By Neil Young. She played it every anniversary, every single one." Daniel turned away. Emily looked at me like she was seeing through me. "You weren't there for the song. You weren't there for the birthdays. You weren't there when we lost our first dog. You weren't there when she cried in the laundry room. You weren't there for anything, Dad. Please," I whispered, "don't go." But they were already walking to the door, Daniel grabbing car keys, Emily holding her backpack like armor. "We're staying at Aunt Claire's," Daniel said. "Don't call, we'll call you." The door closed with a softness that felt more final than a slam. And just like that, the house became a tomb. Not just of Lisa, but of everything we once were. That night, I sat alone in the room I once called my home office. The walls were lined with awards, degrees, plaques that had once validated my worth. Now they looked like tombstones, each one a quiet reminder of the time I could have spent elsewhere. The house was still. Daniel and Emily were gone. Lisa was gone. I opened my phone and played her voicemail again. "Michael, I know you're busy. In case I don't get to say it, thank you. For our children, for the good years. I never stopped loving you, even when I had to stop hoping." Her voice cracked on the last word. I curled forward, elbows on my knees, the phone pressed to my ear like I could somehow crawl through it, back to that moment, back to her. But time is merciless. It doesn't forgive. I cried, not like a man who lost, but like a boy who never showed up. Long, broken sobs that echoed off the hardwood floor. When I finally looked up, the room swam through a haze of tears. I noticed Lisa's old laptop on the bookshelf. Dusty, untouched. It had been years since I'd seen her use it. I walked over, lifted the lid. The screen flickered to life. A password prompt. I typed her birthday. Wrong. Emily's name. Wrong again. I stared at the blinking cursor. Then, on a whim, I typed Michael. The screen unlocked. My breath caught. Inside were folders, dozens of them. One labeled Daniel, first 5 years. Another, Emily's laughs. One folder sat alone at the top. For him. I clicked. Inside were hundreds of photos. Me, asleep on the couch with Daniel curled against my chest. Me holding Emily as a newborn, utterly terrified but smiling. Me cooking pancakes in a robe, flour on my nose. Photos I didn't know existed. She had taken them quietly, secretly. Snapshots of the moments I thought I had missed. But she had captured them, preserved them, loved them. There were videos, too. One of me dancing like a fool to make Emily laugh. Another of me reading bedtime stories, my voice tired but warm. I watched them one by one, each one tearing a new hole in my chest. I had been there. Not always. Not enough. But I had been. and she had seen those slivers of presence as precious. Enough to save. Enough to name a folder after me. I clicked on a final video labeled Anniversary 10. Lisa was sitting at our kitchen table, the lights low. She looked into the camera and smiled. "If you're watching this, you probably forgot again," she said with a soft laugh. "But that's okay, I didn't. I remember it all. Our wedding, the song, the promise you made. I'll never stop fighting for us." She paused, her eyes glistening. "I know work is your way of loving, providing, building, protecting. But sometimes I just wish you'd protect 5 minutes for me." She looked down, then back up. "Still, I never stopped believing that one day you'd find your way back to us. To me. If this is that day, welcome home." The video ended. I sat there, shaking. She had never stopped loving me. She hadn't been bitter. She hadn't left. She had waited. All those years, all those lonely nights, I wasn't being punished. I was being given time to change, and now that time had run out. But her belief that I'd find my way back, that was still here. And for the first time, I believed I could. Monday morning, I walked into my managing partner's office with a resignation letter in hand. The walls were lined with framed verdicts, headlines, and glossy photos of us shaking hands with titans. I had stood in those photos too. He looked up, confused. "You're early. I'm done." I placed the letter on his desk. "Done?" He laughed. "With what? The case? The merger?" "With this," I said, gesturing to the window behind him. "The city skyline, the towers we'd helped protect, the deals that had made us rich." "All of it." He blinked. "Michael, the Stanton case starts next month. You're led. This firm—" "I buried my wife last week," I said quietly. "I missed her surgery because I was giving a speech about corporate ethics. My children won't return my calls. If I don't leave now, there'll be nothing left of me but a title on a door." He stared at me for a long time. "You walk away now. You'll never get back to this level." "I'm not trying to get back," I replied. "I'm trying to go forward." And with that, I turned and walked out. I sold the Mercedes the next day, the watch too, listed the downtown condo I barely remembered buying. I had no more interest in symbols. I wanted substance. I converted my home office, once a shrine to my ambition, into a reading room for Emily and Daniel's future children. I painted the walls light blue, added bookshelves, ordered beanbags and a telescope. It was the first room I'd ever built not to impress, but to nurture. But that wasn't enough. Lisa had been a nurse before becoming a full-time mom. She never complained about giving up her career, but I knew she missed it. So I created something in her name, Lisa Care, a nonprofit fund dedicated to supporting single mothers in nursing school, tuition, childcare, transportation. I used the last of my bonus to seed it. Friends in the legal world donated out of guilt, sympathy, or surprise. I didn't care why. What mattered was that the name Lisa would be spoken again in hospital halls. That mothers like her wouldn't have to choose between their children and their calling. I wrote the mission statement myself. For every woman who chooses love over ambition and shouldn't have to choose. The first scholarship went to a 23-year-old mom named Carla. She dropped out of nursing school after giving birth, unable to afford daycare. When she received the grant, she cried, told me Lisa's story reminded her of her own. I asked if she wanted to meet the family whose name was on the plaque. She said yes. I sent the invitation to Emily and Daniel. They didn't reply. But I kept trying. Each night I sat in the reading room, writing letters to them by hand. Not emails, letters. I told them about Lisa Care, about Carla, about the photo I'd found of us dancing under the crabapple tree at our wedding. Lisa's eyes fixed on me like I was the only man on earth. I ended each letter the same way. I'm trying to become the father your mother believed I could be. Some nights I received no answer. Other nights a short text from Emily. Thanks for the photo, or Carla sounds nice. Daniel stayed silent. Still, I wrote. Because for the first time in my life, I understood something. Showing up isn't about grand speeches or material gifts. It's about consistency, presence. It's about honoring the people who loved you when you were too blind to see it. And maybe, just maybe, it's about becoming the kind of man whose name opens doors, not to boardrooms, but to hearts that once closed in disappointment. 3 weeks after launching Lisa Care, I stopped by Daniel's college unannounced. I hadn't seen him in person since the funeral. He was walking across campus with headphones in, head down, hoodie up. I called his name. He paused, turned, then pulled the earbuds out slowly. "What do you want?" he asked. "I just, wanted to see you." "You could have texted," he said, "like you did when Mom was dying." I swallowed hard. "I'm trying, Daniel. I've stepped away from work. I started a nonprofit in Mom's name. I thought you might want to—" He laughed, bitter and low. "Is this the part where you say you've changed? That you've seen the light?" "I mean it." He shook his head. "You always meant it, Dad. That's what made it worse. You were never evil. You were just absent. And now you're what? Redeemed? Want a medal?" "I don't want anything," I said. "Just a chance to earn my way back." Daniel looked at me, eyes hard. "You should have been an actor. You'd win an Oscar with this comeback arc." Then he turned and walked away. Later that week, I dropped off a birthday gift for Emily, an antique camera like the one Lisa used to own. I wrapped it in soft cloth and wrote a card by hand. Left it on the porch. She didn't reply. 2 days later, I got a text. "You remember what day it is? Great. Took you 20 years. By the way, how long after Mom died did you start crying? Be honest." I stared at the message for a long time. My thumbs hovered over the screen, searching for words that didn't sound like excuses or poetry. I typed, "Too long, but not a day since that I haven't." She didn't answer. That same week, I forgot my neighbor's name. We've lived next door for 9 years. Then I misplaced my keys. Found them 2 days later in the freezer. I laughed it off, but the dread lingered. 2 more incidents followed, losing track of where I parked, mixing up the kids' birthdays on a form. These weren't little slips. They were gaps. I made an appointment with my doctor. She ran tests. Memory recall, cognitive mapping, pattern recognition. I failed more than I should have. A week later, she called me in. "You're still functional," she said gently. "But the markers are there. Early signs of possible Alzheimer's. We can't diagnose definitively yet, but it's something we need to monitor." The air left the room. Everything inside me went quiet. "How long?" I asked. "Could be years before any significant decline. Could be less. Everyone's different." I nodded. "Of course. Time. That old enemy." She offered resources, support groups, medication plans, lifestyle changes. I took the pamphlets, but I barely read them. Driving home, I thought of Lisa, how she must have felt carrying her own diagnosis alone. The fear, the resignation. And still, she recorded that voicemail with love in her voice. I had failed her in life, but now I was running out of chances to make it right with our kids. I went back to the reading room that night, sat under the soft yellow lamp. I recorded a video on my phone. Not for now, but for a time when I might forget how to say these things. Emily, Daniel, if I ever lose the words, just know this. I never stopped trying to get them back to you. I paused, then added, and if I forget your birthdays, your voices, even your faces, remind me, again and again, because you're the only memories I want left standing. I hit save. Then I opened a fresh notebook and wrote, Today, I remembered your mother's laugh. It sounded like forgiveness. Every Sunday, I sat at the old writing desk in the reading room and wrote letters by hand. Not emails, not texts. Real letters, pen on paper, stamped and sealed. One for Daniel, one for Emily. I never asked for anything in them. I didn't plead, I didn't justify, I just wrote about my days, what I was reading, what I remembered about them as kids. How Lisa once burned the Thanksgiving turkey and tried to blame the oven, then ordered pizza and laughed so hard she cried. I included photos sometimes. One week I sent Daniel a picture of us at his second grade science fair. He had made a volcano that didn't erupt, and I carried it out to the car while he cried. Lisa caught the moment on camera, me kneeling, whispering something to cheer him up. I had forgotten that day, but she hadn't. For Emily, I sent the sketch Lisa once made of their dream garden, a winding path, fairy lights, wild lavender. Emily used to help her plant every spring. I wrote, If you ever build it, I'd love to see it. For weeks, nothing came back. No replies, no calls, just silence. But I kept writing. I also visited Lisa every Friday. The cemetery was quiet, shaded by old oak trees. I'd bring a thermos of coffee, sit on the bench beside her grave, and talk. At first, I didn't know what to say, so I read her the letters. I told her what I'd written to the kids, what I wished I had said to her sooner. I pulled weeds around her headstone, trimmed the grass by hand. I cleaned the marble until her name gleamed again. One afternoon, as I was placing fresh flowers, I found a small note tucked beneath the vase, folded neatly, Emily's handwriting. It read, Thank you for the garden drawing. I think I'll try planting this spring. That night, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. Hi, a voice said softly. It's Emily. I closed my eyes. Hi, sweetheart. There was a pause. Then, I got your letter. And the picture. I remember that day. Mom made apple pie even though it wasn't anyone's birthday. She always found reasons to celebrate, I said. Another pause. Then she said, I'll come for dinner this week. Just dinner. I'm not staying. I understand, I said. I'll cook. You don't have to. I want to. That Friday, I made baked ziti, the one Lisa used to make. I followed the recipe from her old notebook, smudged and oil-stained, tucked behind a row of cookbooks I had never noticed before. Emily arrived at 6. She looked older, stronger, Lisa's face with sharper edges. We ate in the kitchen. No music, just clinking silverware and cautious words. I'm not here because I forgive you, she said midway through the meal. I'm here because I miss Mom, and she believed in second chances. That's more than I deserve, I said. She nodded. Probably. After dinner, I offered dessert. She declined. As she reached the door, I said, You look like her. Emily turned. I know. Then she left, but the chair she sat in felt warmer than the one beside it. A week later, a postcard arrived. Daniel, from a music festival. Just 4 words. Still mad, still listening. I pinned it on the fridge. That Sunday, I wrote another letter, and I will keep writing them. Because rebuilding a family doesn't come with applause or quick results. It's slow, uneven, full of fragile moments that might crack under pressure. But every step is worth it. Because one night, as I turned off the kitchen light, I saw something on the counter. A small, folded note. Emily's handwriting. Next Friday works too. Maybe I'll bring dessert. In early spring, Daniel suggested a trip. He called out of the blue and said, "I've been thinking about Mom. There was that place she always wanted to see. The cliffs in Mendocino, the lavender fields." I didn't respond right away. I was afraid to breathe too loudly, afraid he might take it back. "I think we should go," he continued. "All of us. For her." So we did. Daniel drove. Emily brought her camera. I packed the map Lisa once kept in her bedside drawer, the one with a circle around the town she never got to visit. The road was long but quiet. We talked, softly at first, then freely. Emily shared a story about Lisa singing in the kitchen at midnight. Daniel mentioned how Mom used to narrate grocery trips like they were spy missions when he was 6. At the cliffs, we stood in silence, the wind tugging at our clothes, the sea wild below us. I scattered some of Lisa's ashes there, let them fall into the air she never got to breathe. "I think she would have liked this," Emily said. "She would have cried," Daniel added. "And then made fun of herself for crying," I said. We laughed. Together. That night, in a small rental house overlooking the water, Daniel pulled out his laptop. "I've been working on something," he said. "An idea, a podcast, stories people never got to tell their parents. I want to call it Things We Didn't Say to Mom." Emily raised an eyebrow. "That's actually really good." He looked at me. "I want you to host it. Not just an episode, the whole thing." I stared at him. "Why me?" "Because you're the one who didn't say the most, and now you're the one trying hardest to say it." We launched the podcast a month later. I recorded in the reading room, Lisa's scarf draped over the microphone stand. Each episode began with a moment from our life. Me burning breakfast, her folding Daniel's little socks, Emily chasing butterflies in the backyard. Then I spoke. About guilt, about presence, about the danger of mistaking earning for loving. Listeners wrote in, thousands. Fathers who'd missed graduations, daughters who never said, "I forgive you," sons still waiting for an apology that might never come. One email read, "Your story made me turn the car around. I made it to my daughter's recital just in time." Another said, "I finally told my dad I missed him. He cried, for the first time in 30 years." We dedicated episode 5 to Lisa. Daniel shared her voice from an old voicemail, the same one I'd memorized. Emily added music. I closed that episode with this. Love is not a grand gesture. It's staying, listening, showing up. If you're still lucky enough to have the chance, do it now. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was talking to strangers. I was talking to her. And somehow, I think she was listening. I used to think work was love, that bringing home paychecks, bonuses, prestige, that those things proved devotion. I used to believe that missing birthdays, dinners, school plays was acceptable as long as I was doing it for them. I was wrong. You can't deposit presents into a bank account. You can't write off absence as a tax-deductible sacrifice. And you can't buy back time, no matter how much you earn. That became the theme of our final podcast episode, our season closer. We titled it simply, If I Could Start Again. The day we recorded it, I stood in front of the mic with my notes in hand. But I didn't read them. I spoke from memory, from the version of myself that Lisa once waited for. I once chose my job over my family, I said. Not just once. Over and over. I missed the quiet things, the little moments, the ones that stack up and become a life. I paused, let the silence stretch. I used to think I was doing it right, that I was building something noble, but all I was doing was building a wall between me and the people I loved. I looked out the window. The reading room was filled with soft light. A photo of Lisa sat on the desk beside me. She was laughing in it, eyes crinkled, wind in her hair. I thought money would protect us, I continued, that success would bring security, and security would bring happiness. But happiness doesn't come in direct deposits. It comes in dinners you don't cancel, bedtime stories you show up for, hands you hold when the world gets heavy. Emails poured in after that episode aired. Stories of reconciliation, apology, forgiveness. Listeners wrote about going home early, turning phones off during dinner, writing letters to parents they hadn't spoken to in years. One man wrote, "I played your episode for my son. We cried together. Then we made pancakes. I haven't felt that close to him in years." Another woman shared, "I sent my mom a voicemail after hearing yours. She called me right back. We talked for 2 hours. I read every message, slowly, carefully, because each one felt like a piece of Lisa's legacy living on." Lisa Care grew too. Within a year, we'd funded 12 scholarships. Carla, our first recipient, graduated top of her class. At the ceremony, she wore a ribbon that read, "For Lisa, who reminded me I didn't have to choose." Emily helped design the Lisa Care logo, a blooming lavender sprig wrapped around a stethoscope. Daniel helped launch the foundation's blog. We wrote together, as a family. And when people asked why we shared such a personal story, I told them the truth. Because we're not the only ones who've made these mistakes. But maybe, just maybe, we can help someone else make them earlier and fix them sooner. My memory still fades sometimes. I forget where I put things. I lose track of names. The doctor calls it early markers. But I keep a journal now, every night, filled with what I want to remember. Yesterday, I wrote, "Emily hugged me before leaving." Daniel made her laugh. I said Lisa's name out loud at dinner. It felt like a blessing, not a wound. There's one final message I want to leave. For anyone listening, for anyone reading, don't wait. Don't wait to call your dad. Don't wait to forgive your mom. Don't wait to tell your spouse that the way they stir their coffee still makes you smile. Don't wait to show up for the people who need you. And please, don't wait until you're listening to their voicemail just to remember how they sounded. Because one day, that voice might be all you have.